how do you really address that obstacle of the coordinated services model? So,
I was going to say, can I comment on that?
sure.
There's some great opportunity. I know that the Department of Housing and Urban Development has funded database systems in each community around housing and HMIS, and we just recently upgraded to a state-of-the-art data system, and we are very excited at the potential of that for coordinating services, because we've built out a triage and coordinated assessment process in the system that allows us to basically input every phone call and do electronic referrals, track what happened, if they were accepted or refused, and why. So if there's, if it's due to funding issues or eligibility, it also screens for eligibility, and that's built into the system for a lot of programs because people have trouble keeping track of eligibility rules. We are seeing just a lot of potential. One of the things we're struggling with is actually funding people to answer the phones. We decided to pilot our triage process through a warming hotline where we just, when it's below 20 degrees overnight, we open up a hotline. And we're surfacing all these families and children on the streets who we put them in a motel, but then getting that front-end services for linkages has been a challenge with staffing. So, once they get to the program, it's fine, but getting them through those early processes. But I think technology offers us an opportunity. We hope to engage our schools and Head Start providers and those. There's no reason in our community, the way our system is designed, why a personnel in a hospital or a Head Start center or targeted folks in a school district couldn't log onto that system and see who they're linked with and who else they need to link with. It's HIPAA compliant. You can upload documents, so it addresses those document issues. So we just see a lot of potential in that technology.
That's a whole other conversation, isn't it? I mean, being sort of a data geek myself, I just know that there's a lot of opportunities probably that you're thinking of, and now that you've said it out of your mouth, everybody's going, oh.
So may I to that? Because we too see it as an opportunity and a huge obstacle, quite honestly. We did a statewide impact study a couple years ago about how do we better measure impact for families, how are we tracking? And for some of our community action agencies, they have up to 13 data systems that do not talk to each other because their funders require that they use a very specific. So although in theory it sounds that it's a beautiful thing that we could really look at this coordination and one family could be put into a system, funders are not willing to have those conversations where they can bridge and talk, and we do those wraparound services. So it becomes a hindrance at times, that technology piece and those requirements, although we very much understand why they're necessary and the value in those. It can be a real obstacle to being able to do that work and to tell a larger story and potentially asking staff to put information into 4 and 5 systems to be able to do that.
So in ongoing conversations, then you may want to talk about, okay, how can we get this obstacle to be an opportunity and to work more closely together around that. But yeah, data that we can't always get our heads wrapped around. Dr. Manfra has been eagerly waiting.
Thank
here.
you. I just wanted to comment to a few things, and now that this type of data thing has come up, just mention as well, I used to live in South Florida, and as part of one of the things we did there with the lower income population was put together different databases. It worked very well when my team was there doing it. When we left, it's pretty much died away. And I just wanted to come back to something Laura said, that it seemed that I think the individual people in the direct, so that 1 or 2 or 3 people at various organizations who say, yes, this is what we want to do, and have that direct influence on doing it and making it happen really made a big difference, even when there was a big data system, even when there were a lot of systems connected. And just to add to that, we had asked Stacey and I and Carolyn, Head Start directors about partnerships and things, and while this wasn't specifically related to homelessness, the things that they said are actually a lot of the things that you all are saying here as well, in terms of individuals, direct connections, communication's a big thing, having a real role rather than sort of a perfunctory role, and then a time commitment. And I can't remember who was talking about a coordinator, but that sort of takes care of a lot of these things. It's expensive, and a lot of resources need to go into it, but it provides an opportunity for someone to overcome these things, to force the communication. Maybe it was Melissa who said, really seeking out and actually going out and finding folks to partner with and saying, hey, we want to do this. That comes back to a time factor. A lot of people, especially with this issue, will say, yeah, we want to work on this, we want to work together, but I'm working 80 hours a week. I'm not going to go, spend this extra time or whatever to create this. So it comes back to, and again, I'm a big tech guy. I'm a large database guy, and I still work in these databases 10 plus years. But without an individual or individuals who are really putting in the time and effort to it, it seems like at least a big piece of it is missing as far as getting good partnerships together. So I just want to add that.
And the continuity of the people, the dedicated staff or role, position, whatever that might be, is also what I'm hearing.
Eleanor, can
Yes.
I kind of build on that? Some of those capacity issues is what our K-12 homeless liaisons run into all the time. They've been given this task. It's a board-appointed job duty that they get. So sometimes when you're out there talking to school districts, they may not have the time that's really should be allocated to that job. And so what we're seeing under ESSA, another change that I think is for the better, is that school districts have to be able to document and be able to prove, for a better choice of words, that their homeless liaisons have the time to do the jobs and the duties assigned under that federal legislation. So that's a huge change for us at the K-12 level. They've been trying to get that into legislation for probably the past 8 years that I know of. So we were really excited to see that come with the legislation this time. So districts in the past who may have appointed an assistant superintendent who could no way do the job duties as described under that federal legislation are now not going to be able to do that if they can't document or prove that that homeless liaison / assistant superintendent has the time to do it. So I'm hoping that in the long run we can see some big changes.
Great. I'm going to pull in some quiet voices here, just not to target you, but to think, because some of you are working more with the child care arena in various ways, whether it's through regulation, licensure, subsidy, and then just providing that outreach and referral mechanism. How do you see yourselves kind of in this conversation, or how can you elevate what you're hearing and apply that to the work that you do? I mean, I know you do, but I think it's important for us to hear you say how that might be relevant. Sure. Thank you.
Well, I know as I'm listening to everyone speak, one of the things that Child Care Aware of Missouri does, both at the state level, through our statewide network, and at our regional level. We have 4 regions. And so we have those relationships that are the community-based, on the ground, if you will. Most of the folks here have worked with our regional representatives. I know, we work together lots of times. So we have that on the ground kind of understanding. We are, when I had said in my introduction that we are part of local and community initiatives, so one-stop shops, making those connections, making sure that we are filling that piece of maybe we aren't the actual agency that provides the resource, but making that hook so that when someone calls, when someone gets in touch with us, even if we're not aware of it, we either are going directly to the regionals, or the regionals are coming to us and saying, hey, who would that be? How do we get that? How do we do that warm handoff, if you will? So our direct service there is being that point of contact to help folks get to the next piece. So that we find is a vital service that we provide. And it's not only to the families, but it's also to the child care practitioners, because they are on the front lines. And when you have families that are not going to say, yes, we are living in our car, That is a very hard social piece to, deal with. Nobody wants to just come in and say, sure, this is where we are now. Sometimes it's through the children. Often it's through the children. And so helping those child care practitioners have a place to call, to go, those names that they know in their local community through the Child Care Aware of Eastern, Southern, Western, Central Missouri, to say, I don't know what to do, I don't know who to get them to. So we provide that. If we don't know, we will find. We will find a name, a number, and then we're going to call you back in about 2-3 days and make sure if you didn't get it, all right, we'll find another person. We'll find someone else. So it's that warm handoff to try and keep the system going, if you will, in both those ways, with families and with the child care practitioners.
Thank you. And Marianne or Sue, if, from your perspective, your policy, making sure that things are going according to what your regulations are, do you see any successful things going on from your perspective that really address this in terms of the partnerships locally or at the state level?
The Reauthorization Act of 2014 did require that we recognize homelessness, the McKinney-Vento homelessness, as a vulnerable need for childcare, and that we make new policies to assist that. And so we've been kind of reaching out and asking questions and learning more, and it's been quite an eye-opener about how we can provide that extra service for those families. So this is very interesting and very educational for me. So.
Great, I appreciate you saying that. Thank you, because you're under new regulations, like they're just now under new regulations, and you're probably still trying to get your feet planted where you need to be. Sue, what about your perspective here?
Well, I was just going to add that for licensing, it would be looking at those barriers to licensed providers accepting children who are coming from a homeless situation. Licensing requires immunization records be on file at the facility the first day the child is in care. Obviously, that is going to be a barrier. And so, like Marianne, we're listening, reaching out, learning more, and we'll be formulating some either rule changes or policy changes to assist because of the Reauthorization Act and the need to do it.
And that takes time, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, it does. We have just about 10 minutes left in the actual roundtable discussion per se. So you've already mentioned again some of the strengths, some of the successful partnership strategies. Really appreciate you being forthcoming with that kind of information. But what kind of obstacles do you face in funding or supporting this population? Can you think of anything in addition to what you've already shared? And when you think about those obstacles, I always say if you've got a problem, then you need to also provide some sort of a brainstormed solution. So if you see an obstacle or want to share an obstacle, what would be your way to address that? Does that make sense? Is that clear? So anyone want to jump right in? What kind of obstacles do you face in this context?
Since we're talking in the school sense here today, I find that many educators do not understand the impact that homelessness or other social issues may have on the children's learning and behavior. And it's not out of reluctance, it's just a lack of understanding. And so I think that how we overcome that, I'm not sure. I know that the McKinney-Vento, at least in St. Louis area, they have the K-Kids, and they've really strived to make this a better understanding. For instance, there was a bus tour.
That was a really big hit.
Yeah, there was a bus tour several months ago with social service providers as well as McKinney-Vento people, and the buses took folks from, we all started at a school and then went to different shelters. And so that the educators could understand the problems that happen from the shelters as far as school buses and being on time and all, but also so that the shelters could understand how important it is for those children to be at school, ready to learn. And it was just a wonderful event. And if more events like that could happen, it may be able to.
Kind of borrow that approach there.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yes, absolutely.
What Catherine said. I visited and monitored a charter school yesterday, and their homeless liaison, as part of that monitoring, is the McKinney-Vento program. And so she had actually had some of those handouts from that bus tour, and I had the opportunity to sit down for just a few minutes and ask her what she thought of that. And she has been doing that job as McKinney-Vento liaison probably for at least the last 3 years, if not longer. And I found it really odd that when they visited that shelter, she herself, as an educator, didn't know that in some shelters, when I go into a shelter at night, it's an open gymnasium. And my belongings might be in a trash bag at the end of the bed. And so it's hard for people to understand what our children come to school. I mean, how can a child possibly be ready to learn tomorrow if in the middle of the night they got up and everything they possibly earthly had could only fit into a trash bag, and then you take them to a gymnasium where there's 150 other people that they do not know and who might be snoring or making noises or talking out loud, get a good night's sleep while they're worried about what bag of possessions they might have with them, then expect them to come into a classroom and be ready to learn and then pass the MAP test. I mean, it was an eye-opener for me. It does seem impossible, but for that liaison, I mean, it was very eye-opening for her, and I'm glad that she got that opportunity. But for her to have been doing the job that the number of years that she'd been doing it, I think it's just a prime example of why this new legislation that allows our homeless liaisons the time to do the job that they are given under that legislation. That should have been the first thing she did her first year, was go around to the shelters that she was going to be providing services to, her K-12 building, and meet those shelter people and meet the shelter workers and find out what it was like to be in a shelter. One night, just one night. And you're right, how can we possibly get them to the point where they understand that if they don't understand how big a problem it is?